Hi, David here, and welcome back to the channel where we're looking at the teaching of divine love through the automatic writings of the early 20th century medium, James Padgett. In last Sunday's video, 10.6, we looked at a message from Jesus to James Padgett, recounting Jesus' early life and giving us an outline of the process whereby Jesus came to perceive the mission that was before him as he came to adulthood, and how he came to develop the knowledge and understanding of God that he would then go on to teach to others. That message, given on June 7, 1915, was left incomplete because of the tiredness James was experiencing, but it was continued the following evening, and the concluding part, given as a separate message, is what we're looking at in today's video. The first part of the message left off with a discussion of what Jesus called the Christ principle, with him explaining that as the individual, Jesus, he is just as limited to being in one place as anyone else, but that divine love, as evident in him, is not so limited. Instead, it is available universally and will be present wherever it is sought. Jesus begins this concluding message by saying, "I am here, Jesus. I will continue my letter as to my birth and work as I commenced it last night. When I was satisfied that I was chosen by my Father to perform his work of declaring to the world the bestowal of his great gift of the divine love that was in his nature, and which formed the predominant principle of that nature, I commenced my ministry." Just a point of interest here, we know from other messages that Jesus publicly declared his mission early in 26 AD, when he was 33 years of age. He tells us that thereafter, "I continued to work for the redemption of humanity on earth until my death on the cross. I was not then perfect as I am now, and my knowledge of the truths of the Father was not so great as it is now. Let men know, though, that what I taught was true, even though I did not teach all the truth, and they will learn that I am my Father's true Son, and the special messenger by whom these great truths were to be taught to humanity. I was not, when on earth, so filled with the love of the Father as I am now, and had not the power to make men feel that this love is the only thing that will reconcile them to the Father and make them at one with him as I have now. So men must believe that I am communicating to them the real truths, which will show them the way to the Father's love and to their own salvation." So a lot has been happening in the time since Jesus passed from the earth plane to spirit. He has continued to seek divine love, and he has continued to learn. Jesus is quite open about the fact that his knowledge when on earth did not approach the state of knowledge and experience he has now. And this is an important point for him to get across. Often teachers can inadvertently give the impression that their knowledge somehow came to them in a flash of insight, or that they just somehow have it. What Jesus reminds us of here is that all knowledge is enjoyed as a result of undergoing or undertaking a process of learning. The state of knowledge Jesus enjoyed while on earth was the result of the process of learning that he went through while he was here. The state of knowledge he now enjoys is the result of all the learning he has done since then. The next section of the message shifts back to something that was said in the message the previous evening, where Jesus explained that the story of the three wise men, or Magi, does have some basis in fact, even though many other elements in the traditional story of his birth do not. To recap, the three wise men were Magi, astrologers from Babylon. They travelled to Jerusalem and did eventually find Jesus, arriving shortly after his birth, meaning they set off well before it. Now, this tale is based in fact is a remarkable thing. It is inherently unlikely in the extreme that it should be true. It is no surprise that James Padgett is still chewing this over, wondering if it is true and how it was that these travelling magi did in fact find a newborn baby who would become that predicted Messiah. So it is interesting to read what Jesus has to say about all this. He writes to James, "You have in your mind the desire to know how it was that the wise men came to me with their offerings and adoration. Well, the wise men came, but their coming was not because of any knowledge they had, that I was a child divinely created, or that I was not a natural child, but because they were astrologers, and at that time saw a new and brilliant star in the heavens, which to them meant that some important event had taken place." We know from subsequent messages that the star was in fact a nova, visible a couple of years prior to Jesus' actual birth. I know a lot of people have speculated that the Magi being astrologers, they may have noticed an unusual or significant conjunction of the stars, but no. Jesus continues, "Now, being students of the Hebrew scriptures, they concluded that the star was the sign of my birth, the one that the scriptures meant. But outside of this knowledge, as astrologers, and that of the scriptures, they had no other knowledge. I know this because since my coming to the spirit world, I have met these men and talked with them, and they have told me what I write. So while I was referred to in the Bible, Isaiah 53, I mean in the prophecies of the Old Testament, yet these wise men had no other knowledge of the fact than what I have told you." This remains a remarkable story. If the Magi did indeed have such limited knowledge, it becomes even more remarkable that they set off from Babylon in response to seeing this nova in the sky, and even more remarkable that they did eventually find Jesus. For this story to be true, people in spirit must have been preparing the ground for Jesus and the mission expected of him. What Jesus goes on to write in the next paragraph also suggests this. "I know that I was sent by the Father to perform the mission which I performed, and that it was intended in the beginning that I should be anointed as the Christ. But this I did not know until after I became a man, and was then told what my mission was by the angel and by my own inner voice." Jesus has previously said that he had spirit guides, the angel or messenger, as does anyone developing their spiritual awareness. But we also need to develop our own ability to hear or perceive spirit, the inner voice. This can be a challenge for anyone, and the traditions of mediumistic or shamanic cultures are replete with examples of this process of development and the knowledge that comes with it, resulting in a degree of exclusion from the community, perhaps even from family. And Jesus goes on to say that my mother or father or brethren did not know about my mission. And even after I had proclaimed my mission and showed the wonderful powers that had been given to me, they did not believe in my mission, John 7:5, but thought that I was beside myself. That is, as you say, crazy, with the belief that I was the chosen one of God. The Bible itself shows that this was their condition of mind. Mark 3:21. If you check out those two New Testament references, you'll see that there are passages indicating that Jesus' family found his behavior disturbing. He goes on to say, "So, while I am the Messiah of the Bible and the chosen instrument of the Father to make known the great truths which I have proclaimed, and which I shall proclaim through you," meaning James Padgett, "yet I am not the only begotten Son of God, in the sense in which it is usually accepted, and much less am I God. As I have said, there is only one God, and I am merely his son and teacher sent to the world to declare to humanity the bestowal of the gift of immortality, and the way in which men may obtain it. Let no man believe that I was born of the Virgin Mary, or that I was begotten by the Holy Spirit, or that I am God, for all these things are not true." I will stop for the present, and with all my love and blessings, and the blessings of the Father, I will say good night. Your friend and brother, Jesus. So Jesus concludes this message by reiterating some of the things he told James Padgett the previous evening. This is still quite early on in the decade over which these messages were received. So Jesus is still working to overcome some of the traditional teachings that James had been familiar with up to this point. While I was checking those New Testament references in preparing for this video, I noticed another passage that always puzzled me when I was doing my theology degree, and which my teachers acknowledged they also struggled with. The text is at John 6:53 to 6:58. "So Jesus said to them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him, as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who eats me will live because of me. This is the bread which came down from heaven, not such as the fathers ate and died. He who eats this bread will live forever.'" Now, what on earth are we to make of that? The English translation speaks of eating and drinking, but the original Greek really does give the feel of gnawing and crunching on bones, scraping out the marrow. This is a teaching cast in language that is deliberately designed to catch the listener's attention. We do need to keep in mind also that we may not have exactly the words that Jesus spoke, but we clearly have a record of something quite challenging and distinctive that people may remember him actually saying. In order to understand what Jesus means here, we need to keep in mind that the real human is the spirit or soul within the body. Jesus is not talking about the physical form. What's appropriate food for the soul? Divine love. The soul who seeks, ingests divine love through prayer begins to be transformed by it, becomes remade of it. Just as the physical form comes to be made of what we ingest, so too does the soul. A soul made of the substance of God, divine love, by seeking to share in it, will last as long as God does, will live forever, be immortal, because that transformed soul is now made of the same stuff as God. That passage in John 6 is about the teaching of divine love. It's also where the doctrine of transubstantiation comes from, but that doctrine completely misses the point that Jesus was not talking about a physical process, or even a metaphysical process with physical results. He was talking about a spiritual process that the soul can choose to undergo. The ritual of ingesting bread and wine should be understood as symbolical of the teaching of divine love, not about them transforming into an actual physical body and blood. That idea is about as materialistic as it is possible to get, and could hardly be further from the point Jesus was making. Anyway, a slight diversion from the content of the message to James Padgett, but a good demonstration of the light that can be shed on puzzling texts in the New Testament if you keep the teaching of divine love in mind. The next video in this sequence, video 10.8, which will be uploaded next Sunday, will look at a message from the Apostle Paul, who had the conversion vision on the road to Damascus. It's interesting, but quite short, so I might pair it up with another short one from Jesus, given a day or two later. The next midweek video, which should be on Wednesday, will look at 3 short messages from acquaintances of James Padgett who are now in spirit. Although they're short, every single message adds that little bit to our knowledge of what it's like in spirit and how we can best use that knowledge in this world. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It all helps to spread knowledge of this material. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care until then.